Living well is the best revenge, but we're not talking about the mindless ambition of university low culture. Even less are we interested in a pile of consumer goods and every unvetted technical craze this side of a Google phone. This is about living an educated and responsible life. At this point, some may ask, who am I to order people around? The answer is that I'm not. I can barely manage my own issues without trying to control others. The public are free to indulge in mass culture until the cows come home. These are only suggestions. Ignore them or not as you please. As far as I can tell, the educated life depends on two factors. The first is seeing the world as it actually is, not as fictionalized by special interests. That means looking at everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly, without getting all emotional about it. That isn't so easy because corporate media constantly trigger the public with divide and conquer jabs. So whenever you find yourself annoyed by those dingbat Republicans, say to yourself, the culture war is the Frankenstein's monster of large financial interests created to distract attention from elite class war policies. Repeat that 4,000 times. It is a timeless meditation of the glorious ancestors. To see things clearly, it's also important to be careful about whom to trust. We've looked at several examples of the corruption of mainstream institutions, and even scientists can be a problem. Of course, many do excellent work. I'm especially amazed at what can be done by medical science. But many are paid propagandists. Others do very bad work and are too dumb to know the difference. Right now, they're working on AI, which could blow up in all of our faces. The scientific method has no spiritual or ethical component. Its moral guide is the market, and it's often joined at the hip with the human genetic code. As shown by a mountain of evidence, that's one step away from a gorilla in the wild. For many people, it's a very short step indeed. So it's important to see the world without the lies of special interests and biases of your average Joe. That leads to a second priority, taking action. This is a necessity for a couple of reasons. Financial elites have rigged the system worse than Vegas, and the media can't be trusted for directions to the store. Thus, voting is not enough. Change needs both work and study. But there's no reason to overdo it. No one can reverse the wasteful and destructive habits of 8 billion hicks. But that's no excuse not to try. Even a couple of hours a week or a month would make a difference. If everyone did even that bare minimum, this would be heaven on earth. But social issues are complicated, and civic work needs an agenda. As far as I can tell, it has 4 parts. That includes lifestyle choices, charity work, policy formation, and civic action. With regard to lifestyle, please beware. Informed living can interfere with the pursuit of social status and sweet, sweet cash. On the other hand, industrial society is pretty comfortable as is. The simple life is the elegant life, and in the modern world, there's plenty of time for responsible choices. The first step in lifestyle management is watching the carbon footprint, and there are plenty of approaches to take. We can live near the commuter bus or train, and we can lobby for more commuter buses and trains, not to mention clean energy. We might have to accept jobs at lesser salary, and in the dominant culture, that's an outrage. For a rational adult, on the other hand, there are priorities besides dingbat social climbing. We can also swap out the occasional pork roast for nuts, beans, and tofu. Tofurkey is a delicacy in the culinary traditions of antiquity, and legumes are a blessing on the land. They need fewer pesticides and fertilizers. They use 1/10 of the land and water as compared with a pound of beef roast, and they actually heal the earth. They draw nitrogen from the air and enrich the soil for next year's crop. These are critical facts, as an educated person would know. but they don't mean jack to the public. They're not mentioned in media or university. That would upset agribusiness profits, and no self-respecting professor wants a piece of that. There are plenty of lifestyle hacks in the book. One is painting the world white in order to reflect solar radiation back into space. For the stylish crowd, that would include matching trim. White and blue looks pretty in Greece with the blue sea all around. It could also work on the east and west coast. White and gold would look good in the arid west. White and gray and green would look nice in the South, New England, and the Pacific Northwest. We can also use consumer dollars to control the corporation. That would include researching several topics. Those include lobbying, labor standards, trade policy, and production processes. It would involve boycotts, regulation, and tax penalties for unruly behavior. That includes gouging consumers, treating workers like dirt, hiring cheap foreign labor, and outsourcing key industries. In sum, responsible spending is an essential part of bringing the corporation under rational control. Informed people are also careful about which technologies to accept. As a rule, the public swallow every rat-fucking technology the university creates. Currently, we have electronic toys being played with by adults. These are filling the public square with trash content and doing unknown psychological damage to young people. That's only one example. Internal combustion is long past its expiration date, and the whole array of consumer goods need to be vetted for their impact on society and the environment. But accurate product descriptions are not so easy to find. They're currently provided by marketing departments, and these are not the most trustworthy sources. Product research can only be done by groups that are independent of commercial interests. Next comes charity work, and this is a necessity for several reasons. First, the world isn't fair, and the masses can't understand why. So let's clear that up right now. The world isn't fair because people aren't fair. There's no hope that they'll clean up their act anytime soon, and the vulnerable don't have the skills or luck to make it in modern society. They need help which mainstream society is not going to provide. The logical response then is to be fair ourselves. That means work on behalf of society's victims, and this is another issue that needs research. We wouldn't give a $100 bill to a drug-addicted homeless person, and we shouldn't support social programs that do more harm than good. Yet there are plenty of modest, low-tech options. Soup kitchens, mentoring, and tiny homes spring to mind. Next is policy formation, and this also is a brain teaser. Public policy is convoluted to the max. There are partisan groups doing their best to muddy the waters, and mainstream institutions are under orders to conceal the issues. For example, the class war policies of the last 50 years are not mentioned in journalism or university. I've listed a few of them in the power structure video, and it's imperative to understand them all. We can't do jack about them until we do, and the whole bunch are explained in detail in the book. We also need to understand the mixed economy and its many features. To restore fiscal responsibility, for example, government regulations need to be reviewed for practicality and cost-effectiveness. Deficit spending and federal debt have to be reduced. This would reduce corruption and save mountains of cash in interest payments. Trade, labor, and immigration law should be revised to protect jobs, raise wages, and bring back essential industries. Given the trustworthiness or lack thereof of modern dictatorships, it's best to strengthen trade relations with our cultural allies. Those include Europe, Japan, Taiwan, Singapore, Canada, Australia, and Latin America. That could protect America from broken supply chains and foreign corruption. Clean energy subsidies would supercharge other sectors of the economy. They would also create good jobs. And let's pause here for a public service announcement. A top priority of economic policy should be well-paying tech and construction jobs for American minorities. On a lighter note, the welfare system was built with good intentions, but it's failing in significant ways and is long overdue for a redesign. Likewise, foreign aid should have strings attached that discourage the drug trade and government corruption and promote small families and sustainable industry. Corporate spokesmen, in the guise of statistics consultants, are currently warning about a population collapse. But as Twain said, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. In this case, it's a corporate ploy to boost the supply of cheap labor and cannon fodder. There's no evidence that falling population is or could be a problem. With 8 billion people on Earth and natural resources disappearing, it will take years for the population to get down even to sustainable levels. We also have an industrial and technical infrastructure that could easily provide for a smaller population. Given these realities, the demand for more baby making is another example of the savagery of the financial elite. Meanwhile, drug addicts and the mentally ill are allowed to run wild in the streets. That's a result of the alliance between the NIMBY crowd, leftist social justice delusions, and corporate interests that don't want to pay for services. These were fused into one of the class war policies when mental hospitals were shut down in the 1980s. Cheap housing should be available to the vulnerable, but with restrictions that control crime and garbage. This could be done with tiny houses, single-room occupancy units, social workers, and policing. This isn't rocket science, but it'll mean pushback against financial interests and nut jobs on the left and the right. That brings us to civil action, and as Yul Brynner said in The King and I, is a puzzlement. Many civic organizations are front groups for corporations, and those that aren't often have partisan blinkers. So the focus should be on practical, nonpartisan solutions. Of course, you won't find those in a news media bellowing culture war slogans at the tops of their lungs. Yet there are many issues that need to be tackled. First, there's need to infiltrate civic groups and get them working on the issues. Also, the filibuster allows special interests to block legislation. It needs to be removed ASAP. Campaign finance is a system of legalized bribery that must be reformed, and the Democratic Party has to be liberated from corporate domination. These are some of the more pressing issues. Another is the creation of independent media. Since internet content is not as structured as TV news, the next step is to take control of cable channels currently airing sports reruns. That could begin with a lawsuit. Using the argument that financial interests shouldn't be allowed to dominate public speech, the case would fly through the courts like a Jack Russell Terrier on the wing. The objectives are clear. Corporate broadcasters are a blight upon the land. Their lies need to be challenged 3 seconds after they're spoken, and the public need reliable civic info. The logical people to handle this are the producers currently on the net. They need to get on this immediately. Perhaps the most important issue is nonpartisanship. We're talking about a citizen effort to unite voters on both sides of the political spectrum. The goal is to build a coalition that could dominate elections, take control of government, and make global monopolies subject to democracy. This may seem impossible, but it gets easier with some consideration. The first step is for liberals to admit their own failures. Those include our support for globalism, our blindness in letting financial interests change the subject from class war to identity politics, and our stupidity in allowing the far left to run wild in the suites. There are many others. Most are covered in the book, and it's imperative that they're all known and understood. Only by admitting our own failures will we have the authority to call out Republican lunacy. Supply-side policy, Donald Trump, seditious and anti-public health propaganda, and several economic meltdowns spring to mind. We should also recognize conservative strengths. Yes, Virginia, they do exist. Hard work, personal responsibility, and working class loyalty are a few. There are others, but liberals can't see them from inside of the maze of tribalism. Liberals and conservatives need to kiss and make up. It's the only way to build an electoral coalition strong enough to reclaim the government from global finance. These are only a few of the examples of the educated life. There are plenty of others. Generally speaking, it's a model based on study, work, and responsible choices. Without understanding the society we live in and taking action on social problems, no one can claim to be an educated adult, no matter how many college degrees they might have. And while global conglomerates have control of our institutions, civic action has to be a major priority. But there's no reason to overdo it. And don't expect any thanks from the masses. As shown by another mountain of evidence, most of the public are pretty horrible. Civic work is not something they value or even notice. Yet the responsible life is not too lonely so long as we have friends and family who love us. It can be alienating, watching millions of drones perform for the greedy bitches that run society. But it's better than being a drone yourself. And the educated life has its own rewards. Being guided by facts, logic, and civilized values can be very satisfying. And looking back on a life of civic action and responsible choices is a true joy.